Committee will come to order. Good morning. The House Armed Services Committee meets today to receive testimony on the fiscal year 2012 President's budget request for the U.S. Pacific Command and U.S. Forces Korea. I welcome our witnesses, the Commander, U.S. Pacific Command, Admiral Bob Willard, and Commander, U.S. Forces Korea, General Skip Sharp. Thank you both for being with us. It's a pleasure to see you again. I'm sure you're much happier here than in the Pacific. Just kidding. First, on behalf of this entire committee, please allow me to express my heartfelt sorrow to the people of Japan for the terrible disaster which struck unexpectedly on March 11th. Japan is not only an esteemed trading partner, but the military alliance of our two nations forms the cornerstone of our mutual security in the Pacific. Admiral Willard, please convey to your counterparts in the government of Japan that the U.S. Congress stands by them and offers our support to continue to help its citizens rebuild and recover. In preparing for this hearing, I noted with amazement that the physical damage from the earthquake and tsunami is currently estimated at $250 to $309 billion. That's more than 350% higher than Hurricane Katrina. Admiral Willard, please let us know what type of assistance the U.S. military has been able to offer Japan, what additional help they may need, and what the status of U.S. personnel and their families is right now. Apart from Japan, however, our witnesses have responsibility for one of the most geographically and ethnically dispersed regions of the globe, which will present some of the greatest opportunities and challenges to our national security in the coming decades. In its 2011 edition of the Military Balance, the International Institute for Strategic Studies, or IISS, drew ominous conclusions about global developments in defense policy and armed forces. The IISS head, Dr. John Chapman, warned the United States in the next few years it's going to have to make some very significant decisions on what it does. The IISS highlighted the contrast between defense cuts in the West and booming military spending and arms acquisitions in Asia and the Middle East, concluding there is persuasive evidence that a global redistribution of military power is underway. In particular, the rapidly expanding military power of China continues to overshadow other Asian states' military efforts and creates unease among American allies in the region. The report further observes that the Korean Peninsula is now as dangerous a place as it has been at any time since the end of the Korean War in 1953, given the imminent and possibly unclear leadership succession in North Korea and that country's aggression toward the South. In this context, it's never been more important to ensure that our forces in the Pacific have the personnel, training, equipment, and authorities they need to instill confidence in our allies, deter aggression, and remain ready to respond decisively to any contingency that may arise. Admiral Willard, General Sharp, thank you for your many years of service. Thank you to those who serve with you. Please express to them our sincere appreciation for all that they're doing. We look forward to your testimony. Ranking Member Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Admiral Willard, General Sharp. Appreciate your work on behalf of our country. You're in a very, very important region. I also want to begin by joining in the Chairman's comments about the terrible tragedy in Japan and the impact there, to pass along our best wishes to a very strong partner and a very strong nation during a very difficult time, and also to thank the Pacific Command for all of their work to help with that disaster. You've done an amazing job and shown, I think, once again what the reach of the U.S. military can do in terms of humanitarian, in terms of being able to help people when they need it most throughout the world. You've been a fine example of that in Japan, though I know the challenges remain great. So thank you for your service on that. More broadly speaking, I think the Pacific Command covers a very vitally important region. There are many challenges in that region, but I think also there are great opportunities. Some of the largest, strongest economies in the world are there, as well as a lot of others that are emerging. These are some of the central emerging markets in the world, and a positive relationship between the United States and these countries can be critical towards our economic growth, towards our economic opportunities, and certainly towards creating a more stable world. And I appreciate both of your work to try and make that happen. Obviously, in the region, beyond Japan as a central partner, China is a critical country, and building a more positive relationship with them, I think, is very important as we go forward, and also very difficult because our interests do not always coincide. But I still believe that what we have in common outweighs what is different, and I think with strong leadership we can build a positive partnership so that hopefully as we go forward, China works with us occasionally to help the stability of the region and the stability of the world, for that matter. So the relationship with China is critical. Anxious to hear what your gentleman's take is on where that is at. And then lastly, of course, is North Korea itself. I simply, I agree with what the Chairman said. Very volatile area, very dangerous, and seemingly getting more so every day. So I look forward to your testimony about how we manage that very difficult challenge to regional and global stability. With that, I yield back, and I look forward to your testimony.
Thank you. Both of your testimonies will be included completely in the record. We look forward to hearing what you have to say, Admiral.
Thank you, Chairman McKeon. And Mr. Chairman, in order to accommodate the committee's questions sooner, I'll keep my remarks here brief, and as you've already suggested, ask that my full statement be included for the record. Chairman McKeon, Congressman Smith, thank you for this opportunity to appear before you and discuss the United States Pacific Command and the Asia-Pacific region. I'd like to extend our best wishes to Representative Giffords for a speedy recovery. As a Navy spouse, she's a key member of our military family, and our thoughts and prayers remain with her and with her family. I'd like to begin by recognizing my wife, Donna, who's been at my side for 37 years. She's an outstanding ambassador for our nation and a tireless advocate for the men and women of our military and their families. She recently accompanied me to Japan, where she met with service spouses and then traveled into the tsunami-stricken region to visit a shelter for 1,200 displaced Japanese survivors. On that note, I'd like to begin by offering our deepest sympathy for the people of Japan who've been affected by an unprecedented confluence of earthquakes, tsunami, and consequent nuclear accidents. In the midst of tragedy, the people of northern Honshu have demonstrated remarkable courage and resolve. Their ability to endure, to assist one another through hardship, to clean up their communities and recover their lives should be an inspiration for us all. The devastation Donna and I observed from the 11 March natural disasters was staggering, and the significance of the continuing nuclear crisis adds a level of disaster response complexity and urgency that's without peer. U.S. Pacific Command remains fully committed to supporting response efforts by the Japanese self-defense forces. I established a joint support force in Japan whose mission includes humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, including support to the Japanese Defense Forces who are spearheading the Fukushima nuclear accidents response. At the same time, we're guarding the safety of U.S. service personnel and their families, whether they're operating in direct support to the relief effort or carrying out their normal duties at their home bases. A second PACOM Joint Task Force planned and executed the voluntary departure of spouses and dependents and maintains a follow-on departure plan should it be required. The level of cooperation and collaboration between the servicemen and women of the United States and Japan has been remarkable, and the job they're doing together is inspiring. Worthy of special recognition is General Ariki, Japan's Chief of the Joint Staff, for his exceptional leadership of nearly 100,000 Japanese service members who are engaged in this effort. Our ability to quickly and effectively support their work is testimony to the maturity and strength of the U.S.-Japan alliance. No doubt Japan will emerge from this terrible combination of disasters a stronger nation. Our hopes and prayers continue to go out to the Japanese people. Natural disasters are but one of the many challenges facing United States Pacific Command throughout the Asia-Pacific. This vast region that covers half the Earth is unique both in its size and diversity and the importance to the future of every other nation in the world. Containing the great populations, economies, and militaries, along with more than $5 trillion of seaborne commerce per year, this region has been and will continue to be of utmost importance to the United States. United States Pacific Command's role is to oversee its security and to help to keep the peace, both in our nation's interests and in the interests of our 5 treaty allies and many regional partners. The security environment is never static. Rather, it's characterized by a dynamic range of 36 nations whose varying personalities and influence more or less affect the neighborhood. Each of our 4 subregions, Northeast Asia, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and Oceania, contain unique challenges and challengers that test our collective commitment to security and peace. Yet, in the face of actors such as North Korea, transnational extremist organizations such as Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jamaat Islamiyah, Abu Sayyaf Group, and uncertainties created by rapidly expanding and assertive Chinese military, multilateral organizations such as ASEAN, the East Asia Summit, and bonds between the United States, its allies, and partners serve to moderate the challenges, deter the challengers, and provide forums for advancing the collective security of the Asia-Pacific region. Overall, the prospects for continued peace, economic growth, and advancing security cooperation in the region remain promising. Though we're repeatedly reminded that only through the U.S.'s ability and willingness to underwrite the security through our continuous presence, extended deterrence, and protection of the global commons upon which the region's livelihood depends, will regional peace and security endure. Every day, our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and civilians work to advance security in the Asia-Pacific. Their success has long been enabled by this committee's sustained support. You've provided the servicemen and women of U.S. PACOM with the most technically advanced military systems in the world and a quality of life worthy of the contributions of this all-volunteer force. On behalf of the more than 330,000 men and women of United States Pacific Command, thank you, and thank you for this opportunity to testify on our defense posture in this most critical region of the world. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. General Sharp.
Chairman McKeon, Representative Smith, and other distinguished members of this committee, I welcome this opportunity to discuss the current state of United Nations Command, Combined Forces Command, and United States Forces Korea, and to answer your questions. I also want to thank this committee for its support for our service members, Department of Defense civilians, family members that are all working together in the Republic of Korea. The Republic of Korea, a strong and enduring ally, is located in Northeast Asia, where the world's largest militaries and economies reside. The Republic of Korea-U.S. alliance ensures security and stability in Northeast Asia. The Republic of Korea is also a great global security partner with a PRT in Afghanistan, anti-piracy operations off the coast of Somalia, and several UN peacekeeping operations around the world, and they are assisting in tackling proliferation. Most importantly, the Republic of Korea and the U.S. alliance continues to face a North Korea that threatens both regional and global security and peace. Last year, the Republic of Korea was the victim of 2 unprovoked attacks by North Korea. On 26 March 2010, a North Korean submarine attacked the Republic of Korea naval ship, the Cheonan, and on 23 November 2010, North Korea artillery barrage on the Republic of Korea island of Yongpyeong-do. These brutal attacks resulted in the death of 48 South Korean service members and 2 civilians and numerous other casualties. The Command's mission is to deter North Korean provocations and aggression, and if deterrence fails, to fight and win. In support of this mission, forces are maintained on the Korean Peninsula and operate closely with our South Korean ally. The Command's first priority is to be prepared to fight and win. Maintaining a combined fight-tonight readiness is a key reason why U.S. forces are stationed alongside their Korean counterparts in the defense of the Republic of Korea. The alliance stands ready to address the full spectrum of conflict that could emerge on the Korean Peninsula. Maintaining this preparedness is accomplished through the development and continual refinement of our bilateral plans to deter and defeat aggression while maintaining an ability to respond to other destabilizing conditions that could affect the Korean Peninsula. Successful execution of these bilateral plans require a well-trained force. 3 annual joint, combined, and interagency exercises, Ultra Freedom Guardian, Key Resolve, and Full Legal, serve as key enablers for maintaining the combined command's fight-tonight readiness while also preparing for the future transition of wartime operational control. The second priority of the Command, to strengthen the Republic of Korea-U.S. alliance, supports the June 2009 United States and Republic of Korea Joint Presidential Vision Statement. A strong alliance better deters North Korea provocative acts and promotes peaceful, secure, and prosperous future for the Korean Peninsula, the Asia-Pacific region, and the world as a whole. Last year, President Obama agreed to the Republic of Korea President Lee Myung-bak's request to adjust the timing of the transition of wartime operational control from April 2012 to December of 2015. He also agreed to develop a plan to better synchronize all the ongoing transformation initiatives, of which OPCON transition is just one of the elements. Called Strategic Alliance 2015, this plan was affirmed and signed by the United States Secretary of Defense Robert Gates and the then Republic of Korea Minister of Defense, Minister Kim Tae-young, at the 42nd Security Consultative Meeting in October of 2010. Strategic Alliance 2015 synchronizes multiple U.S. and Republic of Korea transformation efforts that are designed to build adaptive and flexible capabilities to deter and to defeat aggression should it occur. Key elements of that Strategic Alliance 2015 include refining and improving combined defense plans, defining and developing the new organizational structures and capabilities required by the Republic of Korea to lead the warfight, implementing more realistic exercises based upon the North Korean threat of today and tomorrow, preparing for the transition of wartime operational control in 2015, and consolidating U.S. military forces in the Republic of Korea onto 2 enduring hubs under the Yongsan Relocation Program and the Land Partnership Program. This repositioning of U.S. forces in the Republic of Korea improves force readiness, quality of life, my third priority. It realizes stationing efficiencies and signals the continued American commitment to the defense of the Republic of Korea and engagement in the region more broadly. Restationing also enhances force protection and survivability. Finally, normalizing tours in Korea was reinforced in October of 2010 when the Secretary of Defense Gates directed the U.S. Forces Korea and the services to proceed with full tour normalization as affordable. As a force multiplier, tour normalization keeps trained and ready military personnel in place for a longer period of time. It improves readiness, combat capability, lowers turbulence in units, and reduces the stress placed on troops, units, and families. In closing, the men and women assigned to United Nations Command, Combined Forces Command, and U.S. Forces Korea remain committed and stand ready. Our ongoing efforts to implement Strategic Alliance 2015, the Yongsan Relocation and Land Partnership Program, and tour normalization demonstrate a long-term U.S. commitment to not only security for the Republic of Korea, but for the broader region of Northeast Asia as well. I am extremely proud of the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, Department of Defense civilians, and their families serving in the great nation of the Republic of Korea, and your support for them is truly appreciated. This concludes my remarks, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Admiral Willard, the IISS report I mentioned in my opening statement is just the latest analysis that suggests there is unease among American allies in the Pacific. What do you hear about perceptions of the United States in the region and this growing disparity between the growth of China's military and plans to cut defense spending in the United States due to budgetary pressures? And what more can the U.S. military do to bolster confidence in our allies and deter future aggression in the region?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman McKeon. The general perception, I think, within the Asia-Pacific, and especially among Southeast Asian nations, when I took command a year and a half ago, was of uncertainty regarding U.S. commitment to the region overall, and frankly, uncertainty regarding our presence in the region, and whether or not, as a consequence of the wars in the Middle East, that had been diminished. We have made a concerted effort, and I think Secretary Clinton and Secretary Gates' commitment to the region and statements made in Vietnam and Singapore throughout 2010 helped to reinforce and reestablish the United States' commitment to the Asia-Pacific. The presence of our forces has been made more noticeable. Interestingly, in this region of the world, for many of these nations, in order to know that we're present, we have to tell them. And so part of that message has been shared. But I think that our allies in the region in particular, and Australia, to point out one, have been vocal regarding their desire to help enhance U.S. presence throughout the region, and especially in Southeast Asia, in and around the South China Sea, by making overtures to the United States to team more broadly with them and perhaps enable a rotational force presence from regions closer to that particular area.
Thank you. General Sharp, do you agree with the IISS assessment that the Korean Peninsula is now as dangerous a place it has been any time since the end of the Korean War in 1953? And how do the South Koreans view their relationship with the U.S. today? The South Koreans have made significant strides in developing a robust military capability in light of the existential threat they face from the North. This growth in capability has enabled the United States to reduce its presence on the peninsula somewhat. Please explain how tour normalization will help you increase readiness even with a smaller force. What else do you need in terms of facilities and family services to achieve these goals?
So thank you. If you look back over last year, the two attacks that I named, and then look forward over the next couple of years, I believe that there are some real challenges from North Korea that we have to be prepared to deter, and if deterrence does not work, be prepared to respond to. As North Korea works through the succession that they are ongoing now, as North Korea tries to become, as Kim Jong-il has claimed, to be a great and powerful nation in 2012, I do worry that there are additional attacks and provocations that are being considered within North Korea. We call on North Korea that those are not necessary, and we are working very hard with the Republic of Korea to deter any future provocations, but be prepared if deterrence does not work. The way that we are working through that, as you said, is to make sure that the alliance is as strong as it can be right now, and we are of one voice and one set of action in order to be able to prepare for North Korea. We are at 28,500 troops in the Republic of Korea at this time, and it has been that way for the last several years under Secretary Gates and President Obama's leadership. They have said that force level will be sustained for the foreseeable future, and I believe that is about the right force level for Korea to do what we need to deter and to respond across a wide range of possible scenarios from North Korea. You asked specifically how tour normalization has helped increase the alliance together and increase our readiness. We have moved from, in the summer of 2008, about 1,700 command-sponsored families to the point now where we have over 4,100 command-sponsored families in Korea. All of those forces have moved from a force where you would rotate 1 year at a time to troops that are now there for 2 and 3 years. You can imagine the increase in unit capability, unit cohesion, if you don't have to train new soldiers every year. I have seen just in that short period of time a great increase of readiness of our units, a great stronger desire within units to make differences within units and improve units. If you stay there 1 year at a time, you can stand on your head for a year. You really don't focus on the long-term good for units and the overall strength that your unit needs to be. So as we move forward in tour normalization, as I said in my opening statement, I and the services owe to the Secretary Gates an affordable plan to be able to move where all of our families can come to Korea, and Korea can become a tour just like Germany, just like Japan, where you're there for 2 and 3 years at a time, really focusing on not only your unit but also improving relationships on a personal basis within the Republic of Korea. That plan is going to the Secretary over the next month or so. He will then make decisions on how to move forward based upon the budget and where he, the importance of this initiative, and that will be presented to you all in the budget that comes forward next January.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member Smith. Or Ms. Bordallo.
I don't think I look like Smith.
Not at all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first, I'd like to say that as a representative from Guam, I too join the rest of the world in sending our deepest sympathies to the people of Japan. The people of Guam, in their generosity, have organized many fundraising drives on the island, and at last count, when I was home, we have raised several millions of dollars. Admiral Willard and General Sharp, thank you for your testimonies this morning. And Admiral, for your information, with all the increased activities going on in Guam now, we are still afloat.
Thank you, ma'am.
My first question is for you, Admiral. Can you describe what progress the U.S. and Japan are making toward achieving tangible progress? Tangible progress is often portrayed as the time when we can move a single Marine off Okinawa to Guam. But I do know in reality much must be achieved before tangible progress can be realized. MILCON on Guam must continue to achieve slow and steady progress, so in due course a Marine can move to fully functioning facilities on Guam. So what are some of the immediate and medium-term steps that must be taken to achieve tangible progress in Okinawa? And further, Admiral, can you describe how this year's military construction budget for Guam achieves our commitment to the Guam International Agreement?
Thank you, Congresswoman Bordallo. The progress toward the Futenma replacement facility that occupied so much of our time with the Japanese last year, we think has begun to move forward this year as a consequence of both Prime Minister Khan's commitment to seeing this forward, to the conclusion of the local elections in Okinawa that took place last fall, and most importantly, the continued effort on the part of both the Office of the Secretary of Defense and the Ministry of Defense in Guam to continue their dialogue through working groups in order to accomplish what we need to move FRF forward. And we are progressing toward the signed commitment by the Governor of Okinawa to begin to make the actual contracting and movement of soil for the first time in the FRF location. I think there are some issues to finalize with regard to runway configuration and so forth, some items that we've talked about in the past, but we feel that progress is being made. I think the overall budgetary commitment on the part of the government of Japan toward Guam remains strong. They continue to carry a considerable amount forward for Guam DPRI issues, and as you and I have discussed previously, they have continued to make overtures that despite the crises that is currently ongoing in Japan, that they'll be able to continue to proceed with the tenets of DPRI, of which Futenma Replacement Facility and the movement of 8,000 Marines to Guam is only one of 19 actions that DPRI contains. So I feel confident that progress, tangible progress, is in fact being made. There are uncertainties, unquestionably, as a consequence of what else Japan is contending with now and the scope of that disaster in terms of financial impact to Japan. But with the commitments that you have heard and that I have seen from the Japanese, and the continued progress that we have seen being made, at least in dialogue, if not in actual construction, I'm confident that we'll continue to progress toward the tenets of the Defense Review Initiative.
Admiral, I also, second part of that question is, how about this year's military construction budget on our part?
I'll have an opportunity next week to discuss our military construction budget before the MILCON committee, and we intend to discuss Guam initiatives in particular. I remain concerned that there be sufficient commitment within the MILCON budget to proceed with the infrastructure development, in particular attendant to the Marine Corps facilities as they've been described. So the infrastructure in and around the area south of Andersen Air Force Base, Finnegayan, and the infrastructure needed on the defense posts themselves in the area of Andersen Air Force Base, both very critical to precede the development of housing and other military construction that comes later.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Admiral. And my next question is for General Sharp. General, I believe we share a common mission of layered defense against potential North Korean aggression. In Guam, we are poised to host the development of a ballistic missile defense system that will be a key component of strategic deterrence in the Pacific. What other elements of defense do you see as necessary to demonstrate U.S. resolve in the Pacific theater? And how else should the administration and the military illustrate that regardless of events taking place around the world today, we are still committed to assured access for us and our allies to and freedom of maneuver within the Pacific Global Commons? And I once heard a general officer recently at a hearing who was stationed in Korea state that he felt more comfortable when the B-52s or the B-2s were stationed in Guam. So do you share that sentiment, and can you explain the role of long-range strike on the Korean Peninsula?
Thank you. I can answer from a Korean Peninsula perspective, and then the broader Pacific perspective. I'm sure Admiral Willard would like to comment on that. Within Korea, we are working very hard to make sure that for missile defense, both the Republic of Korea and the U.S. alliance are strong and prepared for what North Korea could throw at it. So the Republic of Korea is moving forward, buying and employing more radars and command and control systems for their Patriots, which they have recently bought. They've just launched the third Aegis ship. We are working in concert with them to establish a good system within the Republic of Korea for missile defense in order to protect the valuable assets that we would need if we have to go to a war fight there. the deterrent value that comes from the B-52 and other systems that Admiral Willard would send to the fight in Korea is a huge, more than just a deterrent value. It is critical for our warfight and is key component in order to be able to take down long-range systems, to include missiles that would be coming towards South Korea. So that's from a Korean perspective of what we're working together to be able to do that. I don't know if you want to add
Admiral?
it.
I would just comment that among 5 treaty allies in the Asia-Pacific region, the Republic of Korea is certainly an important one. The systems at Andersen Air Force Base in Guam, specifically the B-52s and B-2s, as you've mentioned, are an element of the extended deterrence that the United States affords our allies and partners in the region. And certainly their ability to respond to contingency on the Korean Peninsula is an important part of why they're there.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have one quick question, one more. This is for you, Admiral Willard. We've had some significant achievements and progress in reducing the capabilities of extremists in the southern Philippines, thanks to a number of initiatives with the Philippine military, including the State Partnership Program. Are there any lessons in this anti-insurgency strategy in the Philippines that we could utilize in Afghanistan?
I think that's a good question. The southern Philippines has been a relative success, we believe. Over the past half-dozen years, the 400 or 500 special operators that Pacific Command has maintained in the southern Philippines have done a credible job in working with the armed forces of the Philippines in order to defeat and contain Abu Sayyaf group and Jamaah Islamiyah extremists that were operating there. And we think we're at a point where planning can commence for a next phase. So in general, we consider this to have been successful. I think one of the key comparisons between the southern Philippines and Afghanistan has been the role that the armed forces of the Philippines have played in the lead of this counterterrorism effort. And when you consider the work that's ongoing in Afghanistan in order to build up the Afghani security forces and Afghan police forces in order to make them as self-sufficient and accomplished as the armed forces of the Philippines has been, it points to the need for that work to continue. So I think the idea of our armed forces being in support of a self-sufficient host nation armed force that can conduct the counterterrorism in the lead is the lesson that we have derived from our success in the Philippines.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask, I'd like you to take 2 questions for the record, if you would, because I think that at the table you may not have the consultation necessary to formulate an adequate answer. The first for Admiral Willard. The Chinese, as you know, are buying oil reserves all over the world. We use 25% of the world's oil. We have only 2% of the world's reserves. We import about 2/3 of what we're using, and yet we're buying no oil reserves anywhere in the world. You might note that at the same time, the Chinese are aggressively building a blue water navy. Why this difference in our national strategies relative to purchase of oil, and how should this instruct us for our future planning? General Sharp, there is a nuclear detonation above the atmosphere in over Korea. The North Koreans, in a panic, call and say, gee, I'm sorry that bird got away from us, but we detonated it above the atmosphere so that it wouldn't produce any harm. Of course, it will produce a huge electromagnetic pulse. How much of your warfighting capability will be decremented by this as compared to the North Koreans, and what will be the effect of that on our warfighting capability? I would like to read a couple of brief paragraphs from an op-ed piece in the April 4 commentary in the Washington Times. It's called Dear Leader to Dead Duck. and it's ostensibly written by Kim Jong-il, and he is admonishing Gaddafi as to his failures. The imperialists call us both crazy men, but there is a difference. They fear my craziness, not yours. This time last year, our glorious North Korean military forces struck like a hammer and sank a warship belonging to the puppet regime below our southern border. What did the imperialist forces do? Nothing. A few months later, we shelled the territory right in the middle of their war game practices. What did they do this time again? Nothing. You, on the other hand, have not raised a hand against these sniveling hypocrites for many years. You played ball with them, as they like to say. You allowed the yellow wind of capitalism to blow through your country. You invited the giant capitalist bloodsucker BP to siphon off your people's birthright for its own profit, so also fat capitalists can ride around in luxury vehicles. Oh, what a mistake it was to give away your weapons of mass destruction. And it goes on. And my question is, how much of the world sees it this way?
Sir, I believe that I can talk for the Republic of Korea and our alliance there, is that we do believe that North Korea is continuing to develop their nuclear weapons. Kim Jong-il has said that. He has said the importance of that to him, that his plan is to continue to do that. I do not believe that he will give that up. What we work to do is to be able to deter future attacks that will come out of North Korea, like the two that are mentioned in those articles. The Republic of Korea and the U.S. Since then have made great progress in strengthening the defenses for the types of provocations that North Korea has and could do in the future. We are working very hard to have appropriate plans in place to not only to deter but be prepared for a strong response against North Korea. I think that from a South Korean perspective, the attack on Waipio, Yongpyeong-do, on the 23rd of November changed the Republic of Korea. At that time, the Republic of Korea, everybody across the nation was watching that attack live on their handheld devices. It was clear evidence that North Korea was willing to attack the Republic of Korea and kill civilians. And that changed the Republic of Korea's view that if North Korea does attack again, a very, very strong response, proportionate but strong response in self-defense will be going back towards North Korea. There was a response on the 23rd of November, a fairly rapid response that went back as far as artillery back towards the source of the provocation. Since then, a lot of work has been done to really determine what is the appropriate response and the accuracy of that for future types of provocations.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to your written responses to my questions for the record. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Langevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Willard, General Sharp, I want to thank you both for your attendance here today and most especially for your service to our nation. Let me begin by also thanking the sailors and Marines who have assisted with the recovery effort in Japan. Obviously, Japan is one of our nation's most important friends and allies in the region, and it's truly a sign of respect and a sign of how important that friendship is that we send our best and brightest young men and women to their aid in their time of their national need. Gentlemen, I want to discuss several topics right now that are of personal interest to me around two strategic issues vis-a-vis our military posture in the region. Over the past 10 years, China has made significant investments in their ability to project regional sea power, specifically rapidly increasing the size of the submarine fleet. In the U.S., we've begun the process of doubling our production rate for the Superior Virginia-class submarine. However, we still face the near-term challenge of a declining fleet. So, Admiral Willard, can you please discuss some of the importance of the U.S. submarine fleet in the Pacific and China's decision to increase its sea power projection capabilities?
I think unquestionably China has made tremendous investment in its maritime capabilities across the board, to include the PLA Navy. We have no doubt that they have aspirations to make that a blue water Navy that's deployable around the world, and they're demonstrating that today with anti-piracy operations in and near the Gulf of Aden, and they demonstrated it to a lesser extent by moving some of their surface fleet into the Mediterranean Sea during the Libya crisis in order to assist in evacuating Chinese citizens. So they are expanding their fleet, patrolling more, penetrating the first island chain, and extending their operations further into the Pacific on a fairly steady pace. The importance of United States submarines to the Asia-Pacific can't be overstated. The submarines afford us both a covert and highly capable platform from which to characterize the undersea environment and to help to dominate that domain. The increased production of the Virginia-class submarine, I think, was a critical national decision for the United States and a very important one for the naval forces, and I think an important one at the end of the day for U.S. Pacific Command. And there's no question that within that PLA Navy expansion, they've placed great emphasis on an expanding submarine force in their own right, and we've endeavored to watch that development, that dimension of the PLA Navy development very closely.
Thank you, Admiral. The second issue I wanted to discuss was the threat to the U.S. and our allies from ballistic missile attack. The North Korean government has proven time and again its willingness to dangerously push the line of what's acceptable behavior in the region. Given their interest in developing missile technology and nuclear capabilities, it's vitally important that it retain a serious missile defense capability in the region. Admiral Willard and General Sharp, could you both please discuss our regional defense, missile defense capabilities and their importance not only to our own forces, but to the long-term security of our regional allies? In addition, what challenges do we face relying on shipborne systems, and is there any discussion of utilizing more land-based systems such as those proposed under the President's European phased adaptive approach?
I'll begin, if I may, and to say that we place great emphasis on what I would cast as a growing ballistic missile defense capability in the Pacific. There have been a number of investments both on the command and control side of missile defense as well as on the platform and weapons side of missile defense. Our Aegis fleet continues to grow in terms of its capacities to provide for missile defense, and the production line of standard missiles that are missile defense capable continues to produce. That said, for the United States, recalling when ballistic missile defense became a serious commitment, we continue to grow the capacities that are required to contend with the potential threats from sites such as North Korea. We currently believe that we have an adequate missile defense capability to contend with what we believe to be North Korea's threat that is posed to the region and to the United States. We continue to work with allies and partners to see their interest in developing their own missile defense capabilities. As you're aware, the Japanese are investing substantially there. And as General Sharp has already mentioned, the Korean Peninsula is investing both in land-based and considerations for sea-based tracking, if not ballistic missile defense capabilities. So this is a growing capability in the Asia-Pacific and a growing capability, as you're aware, elsewhere. And yes, we are considering the land-based systems that complement our sea-based systems such that we're not overly reliant on any particular domain, but rather we have the defense in depth that we think BMD demands.
Thank you. Mr. Forbes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral and General, thank you for your service to our country, and you've both done great jobs in helping to keep us free. And Admiral, I particularly appreciate you mentioning your wife, Donna. We know oftentimes our spouses have greater sacrifices than we do. They just don't get to wear the medals. So we appreciate you mentioning that. Admiral, you've been great at talking about all the needs that we have in the Pacific, and we thank you for that. In today's world, with all the gag orders we see coming from the Pentagon and the pre-screening that's going on, I oftentimes don't know what you can say and what you can't say. So the best we can do is throw out the questions we think we need to ask for the defense of the country, and then you can either answer it or glance off of it. But one of the things that I've been concerned about for years is this growing modernization we see with the Chinese military. It is unprecedented, I think, in terms of its speed and the depth that we have seen. And every time we ask about it, we always get the same response. Well, we don't want a conflict with China. None of us want a conflict with China. I don't think they want a conflict with us. Yet if you read all of their white papers, if you study their literature, if you listen to their comments, everything they do is focused upon us. Their modeling has our carriers in their modeling. They look at our weapon systems to defend against our weapon systems. If we don't ask the same questions, we're not being smart, we're being foolish. And so when you look at our strategies, they always come down to a number of things, but at the end, it is how long we can withstand an intensified conflict. If you look at some of their literature, they don't feel that we can take a body blow and keep going for a long period of time. My question for you this morning is, with the resources you have under your command, if we did have an intense conflict that were to develop, none of us want it, but if it were to develop with the Chinese, given their growing modernization, how long could we sustain that kind of conflict?
I think the question is a fair one. I think the question is a very difficult one to answer when you consider the vast number of scenarios that we may be discussing here in terms of any contingency that United States Armed Forces would face, depending on its intensity and the way in which we would choose to deal with it. There are obviously methods where United States Armed Forces, together with the whole of government, can approach a problem not necessarily in the form of attrition warfare in the way that we've classically contended at times in the past. So how symmetrical, how asymmetrical we would choose to approach a conflict matters, and ultimately is part of the answer to your question. I think when you look around the world at what the United States has contended with in the Middle East, 10 years of warfare, and we remain pretty resilient and committed to finishing the warfare that's currently ongoing in Afghanistan. And at the same time, we're able to flex to issues like Libya, or in my case, flex to a large-scale disaster response in Japan, and continue to conduct an exercise series across the Asia-Pacific, albeit at a somewhat diminished rate, but nonetheless we meet our commitments throughout the region. There is capacity in the Asia-Pacific that sometimes belies, I think, the assumptions made regarding both the combat power and the power to sustain operations there. I'm confident that I've got the force structure right now postured forward and available to me to do the work that I need to do, to include a next contingency should I need to confront one.
Well, thank you, Admiral and General. Thank you for what you're doing. And, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, I want to change the focus a little bit here, go down under. First, Admiral Willard, you mentioned New Zealand and Australia in your written testimony, and New Zealand's contributions to supporting our common interests in a variety of ways around the globe. With regards to Australia, this is, I understand, a discussion going on with the force posture review with Australia. in discussion stage. And I was curious about PACOM's role and your assessment of the progress of these discussions and the focus of these discussions.
Yeah, thank you. The Australians have been extremely forward-leaning in their overtures to the United States government and to the Department of Defense to consider whether or not increasing our level of involvement with their armed forces, taking advantage of some of the existing capacities in Australia, would lend to an improved Pacific Command posture, particularly in accessing Southeast Asia and the South China Sea region. And we have taken a hard look at that. I myself visited Australia and nearly circumnavigated the continent in viewing areas in northern Australia. The prospects of improving force posture in those directions are very appealing. I think that those ongoing discussions between the United States government and Australia government, the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and the Ministry of Defense in Australia will likely lead to fruitful opportunities for us to provide for rotational forces in and out of Australia in the future. At least I'm hopeful for that. As Secretary Gates made very clear, ultimately he'll make a proposal into the U.S. interagency, and beyond his recommendation, it will become a United States government decision at the end of the day, with the Australian government obviously in the ultimate discussion.
Good, thanks. And General Sharp, I sense you had some things to say with regards to Mr. Langevin's comments on regional missile defense, and I had some questions about it too, so I want to give you the opportunity to sort of build on perhaps what Admiral Willard said with regards to Mr. Langevin's, but just question, but just with regards to the regional aspect of missile defense and how ROK would fit into that.
Roger, thank you for the opportunity to say that. Just real quickly also on New Zealand and Australia, they are both, of course, key countries within the United Nations Command and the Military Armistice Commission, and last year were key components in the investigations of both of the attacks on North Korea and participate in our exercises. So they are very important to my command also in what they would do for UN sending states, and we work very closely with that part of the alliance also. The only thing I was going to mention in addition on the ballistic missile defense is I think on a good defense you also need a very strong offense, and to be able to have the ISR type of assets to be able to look into North Korea to see what they're doing. I think what the Republic of Korea is doing now to buy Global Hawk, what we have done in order to be able to synchronize our ISR assets help in a ballistic missile overall architecture also. And then finally on the proliferation side, PSI is a big element to get nations to be able to work together to not allow proliferation of missiles out of North Korea, that type of technology, to include nuclear technology. And the Republic of Korea being a member of the PSI group now and recently hosting a large conference and exercise along those lines are other things that are being done in order to be able to help stop both the use and the proliferation of missile technology and nuclear capability.
Okay, and just quickly, see how quickly you can answer this question. In your testimony, you mentioned tour normalization as, I think it was as affordable, perhaps. Does that indicate the budget's not big enough for tour normalization, or how is that progressing?
As I said, we are at the point now where we have reached about our capacity for all of the facilities that we have to bring families there now. And the limiting factor, to be honest, is schools, and the building of more schools will be the next that go up. As Secretary Gates has said on several occasions, the goal is to be able to move to full tour normalization. But that costs money in order to be able to build the schools, to be able to build the apartments in order to be able to do that. And that's what we owe back to Secretary Gates. What is affordable over what time period in order to be able to complete this very important initiative so that, I mean, today as we sit here, there are 7,000 families that are separated for a year because we don't have the infrastructure in Korea to be able to afford to bring them. Secretary Gates has directed that we work to be able to do that at an affordable pace. As I said in my, earlier, that's what we owe him back over the next several months so he can give direction to the services as they build their palms for submission next year.
Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here and for your service. You certainly have an incredibly important area of the world as we look to the threats that are emerging. As we look to the threats that are emerging from North Korea and also from Iran, we turn to our issues of discussing missile defense, and I would appreciate if you could discuss how the missile defense mission and the multi-mission capability of the Aegis ballistic missile defense ships are affecting the overall force structure requirements for the Aegis fleet. In particular, can you describe how operational considerations, such as the need for additional ships for force protection, influence PACOM's overall missile defense force structure requirements, recognizing that an Aegis ship is going to need assistance while it's providing missile defense capability? And according to a Defense News article in June of 2010, they stated that U.S. Aegis radar readiness plunges and indicated that it's in the worst shape ever, raising questions about the service fleet's ability to take on a high-profile new mission next year defending Europe from ballistic missiles. Could you please discuss any Aegis readiness concerns that you may have and how it might impact the Navy's ability to meet missile defense mission requirements? Admiral?
I'll start with a second question first, if I may, and discuss the readiness piece. With the exception of all of our ships being steamed at a very high pace, and by and large they have been for the last decade while we've been occupied in wars elsewhere and moving forces around a great deal, also maintaining our forward presence in the Asia-Pacific. There are not overarching concerns about Aegis readiness in my fleet. So as far as Pacific Command is concerned, the readiness of the Aegis fleet in terms of conducting its ballistic missile defense mission or any of its other multi-mission tasks is not a concern for me. With regard to the multi-mission role of Aegis and its self-protection capability, these are very competent platforms. As you've alluded, they have about a half a dozen missions that they contribute to include the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance mission that was previously mentioned, but also an air defense mission, a surface defense mission, an undersea warfare mission, and so on. So they're contributing to a great deal at any time when they're at sea. The ballistic missile defense capabilities that they have are limited only by virtue of the capability of the missile systems that they're employing. So as we see advances in the SM-3 system and larger envelopes, the freedom of action that the ships will have to operate at extended ranges away from ballistic missile sites where they can also perform that function will increase. So over time, the freedom of action of ships committed to ballistic missile defense will improve as they also perform their other functions. I would have to understand the scenario you described to say that they themselves have to be protected while they're conducting BMD.
Well, certainly they have needs for additional assistance. I mean, that does provide some demand on your overall ship force structure.
Well, we operate in a variety of modes, with other ships, sometimes singly. These ships, again, are pretty self-sufficient. So to understand the conditions under which they would be operating in a surface action group or in a larger carrier strike group as opposed to independently is something that is probably worth discussion. But by and large, these ships are self-sufficient, and as you suggest, multi-role, and to the maximum extent possible, we intend to keep them that way. And as the ballistic missile defense missile systems continue to improve, the freedom of action to have these ships located at extreme distances from the ballistic missile threat sites will continue to improve as well.
I look forward to having additional conversation about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kissel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, General and Admiral, for being here. And Mrs. Willard, thank you especially for your service. When we consider our military personnel, their families are front and foremost also with our considerations. General, we had talked about, and you had mentioned earlier, that South Korea has stated that, if there's any provocations from North Korea, they will respond in kind and greater. In your opinion, how much of an impression can they make on North Korea? Can they I'm not asking for specifics, but obviously you all discussed this, and is there any concern that they might overreact to provocation?
Thank you. South Korea is a very strong military force that continues to grow stronger every day. In fact, they recently just published their new defense reform plan based upon a lot of lessons learned out of 2010, and are really focusing on the ability to be a more joint type of force that is optimized towards North Korea threat that we see for today and in the future. Without getting into classified session, I have reviewed the plans that the Republic of Korea and we have worked together on for a variety of different types of provocations. They are strong, appropriate, and meet the test of self-defense. And I'm confident in General Han, the Republic of Korea's chairman, who is the chairman for the Republic of Korea, Minister Kim's capability to make sure that they, the South Koreans, do not unnecessarily escalate. What North Korea will do is up to North Korea. But I am absolutely confident that South Korea has the controls, that the response that goes back will be firm, but it will not force an uncontrolled escalation from a South Korean perspective.
Thank you, sir. And Admiral, we had hearings in the previous Congress. At one point in time, our ships, as they were in international waters, were being, for lack of a better word, harassed by the Chinese, fishing boats, whatever. We had trouble just simply making our way through the waters without, fear of hitting other boats. And there might have, memory doesn't serve perfectly, but there was a couple of points where, we did have interaction with some of these other ships. But I don't hear about that so much now, if at all. What is the status of that? Are they continuing to harass our movements in international waters, or what's this relationship now?
From the standpoint of the Chinese maritime activities in and around the East China Sea and South China Sea, Yellow Sea regions where we sometimes operate, we have not had confrontations with the PLA, Navy, or with their maritime security forces since the incidents that you allude to. And the Chinese do continue to shadow some of our ships as they conduct their missions in international waters that are proximate to China. The confrontations that have occurred with our partners and allies in the region. You're no doubt aware of the incidents that occurred with the Japanese over the Senkakus, and confrontations continue to persist in the South China Sea, most recently with a Philippine ship that was operating there. So we continue to observe for, watch over the maritime activities across the board that are occurring in the Southeast Asia region and East Asia region, in order to ascertain where confrontations or conflict could emanate. But to date, this year, there have been no confrontations with our forces.
Admiral, at one time, these confrontations to the point where we had a hearing about it to talk about it, and now that that has been withdrawn, is there a particular reason that you might know that they pulled back there, or was it just recognizing that maybe that wasn't the best policy, or just why do you think maybe that was negated in terms of what they are doing in terms of the relationship with us?
Well, I think probably two things. One, I think the assertions made last year by the United States, in particular Secretary Gates and Secretary Clinton, very strong statements within ASEAN and the Shangri-La Dialogue series, I think had an effect. I think the fact that the ASEAN nations themselves coalesced, marshaled around one another to protest the very assertive actions that we were seeing out of the Chinese over various maritime activities in the South China Sea. I think for those reasons, they have at least tactically withdrawn from any confrontations. But as well, we have resumed military-to-military relations with China. We at U.S. Pacific Command hosted a military maritime consultative agreement round of talks with them, which has to do with maritime safety and air safety. And as you know, there have been visits in both directions, with President Hu's visit that had been preceded by Secretary Gates' visit to China. And I think any time that the military-to-military relationship is ongoing and continuous, that the likelihood of confrontations such as you suggest is diminished.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Whitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Willard, General Sharp, thank you so much for joining us today. I enjoyed seeing you there in Newport News at the USS California ceremony there. And Mrs. Willard, thank you so much for your effort there as a ship sponsor. That was a great day. Admiral Willard, I did want to speak a little bit about what's going on with China's effort to modernize their naval forces. As we know, there are some significant issues there. They're expanding their capability, both with carriers and with other elements of their Navy, in being able to project sea power across the world. They're on the road to, I think, creating a fairly capable Navy. And as we know, they certainly have the quantity elements that begin to create some concern for us, and they're working on the quality side of things. Right now, they're looking at it from a littoral zone issue as far as creating that force, but they're also projecting force out beyond those particular areas, and with a focus to, I think, go well beyond the littoral zone around China. As you know, just this past year, we've seen a Chinese presence in the Horn of Africa, also in the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, and the Persian Gulf. So that tells me that they're on track to do a little bit more than just protecting their shipping lanes and their littoral areas. And going back and looking historically about how the development of navies have occurred, I'd like to go back to historian Rear Admiral Alfred Thayer Mahan and his idea about sea power. And of course, he projected this structure that nations go forth with to be able to project sea power. And as you know, at the end of the 19th century, he wrote pretty eloquently about that. And in the years to come, Japan, the U.S., Germany, and Britain all followed that, and I think they've been pretty successful in projecting that particular sea power force. I want to ask you a question, and that is from their efforts in sustaining and executing sustained power projection through a Navy. And granted, they've got a ways to go, but in the 21st century, with the pace at which they're pursuing this, how do you see that as a challenge to our naval and air forces there at the Pacific Command? And where do you think that we need to be in order to make sure that we are properly countering that in that particular region, in addition to all the other places where we're pulled to as we have humanitarian efforts that we're called to in that region? Let me ask you, in your estimation, where you see the Chinese future projection naval power as a challenge, concern there for Pacific Command.
I think unquestionably the Chinese have aspirations to expand their naval presence and are expanding their naval presence. Your summary, I think, was a very good one in terms of where they're operating today, and we have no illusions that they don't desire to operate further into the Pacific and likely into the Indian Ocean region as well. I think they're learning to sustain their forces elsewhere. It takes time and training and persistence to understand how to sustain forces logistically when they're underway for long periods of time. They've done a credible job with their counter-piracy effort, and I think as a consequence they're rolling the lessons learned back into their other naval activities. Most of their naval presence is in patrol activities in the Bohai, Yellow Sea, East China Sea, South China Sea region, and will likely continue to be there for the foreseeable future as they explore their ability to conduct business elsewhere. In terms of concerns for Pacific Command, I think as long as we remain uncertain regarding future Chinese intent, either with their naval forces or any of their military forces, it's important that we take the necessary steps and make the necessary investments to pace those changes as we see them occur and be able to contend with any possibility of something other than a constructive Chinese Navy or constructive Chinese military in the region. That said, through the mill-to-mill dialogue that's currently occurring, and I think with patience and persistence on the part of the United States in trying to work with China, that at the end of the day we may see a Chinese military, including a Chinese Navy, that's contributing to the broader security of the region and not instead contending it.
Okay. Ms. Hanabusa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Aloha, Admiral
Aloha.
Willard, Mrs. Willard, and welcome, General and Admiral. Thank you for testifying. My question is first with the Admiral. Admiral Willard, especially for those of us in Hawaii, we are watching what's going on in Japan very critically. But we also do know that prior to this, there were issues regarding the Democratic Party and when they took over the Japanese government and what the relationships would be with us. And I think we were just getting to the point where we're getting a better understanding. And then the tsunami and, of course, the earthquake tsunami, and now the problems with Fukushima Daiichi has emerged. First, can you explain to me how important a role Japan plays as our ally in the Pacific area? And secondly, with what we have now experienced and all these different chains of events, and let's not also forget the Constitution of Japan, which has limitations as to their military ability, what are we going to have to do, at least in the short term, to compensate for what is going on in Japan, assuming that their military role with us is critical?
Yeah, thank you very much, Congresswoman. And we hear the alliance between the United States and Japan often referred to as cornerstone, and I think that probably understates the importance of the alliance between the United States and Japan. In Northeast Asia, the ability to maintain a forward force presence in Japan affords us access into the Asia-Pacific region that otherwise would be very difficult to achieve. I think that it's a mutually beneficial alliance. I think the Japanese military, as a consequence of U.S. presence, has grown to be formidable and capable, and as you've already witnessed, extremely interoperable with our forces. I think the combination of the forward forces in Japan and the forward forces on the Korean Peninsula afford the United States an unprecedented deterrent forward in Northeast Asia that could be regarded as extended beyond that. So you can't understate the importance of the alliance in general. In the short term, the Japanese Defense Forces are committed to assisting in saving northern Honshu and their nation from the confluence of disasters that they've experienced. At the same time, they remain a very accomplished force, and they're continuing to conduct their military business in the region, notwithstanding the 100,000 or so ground forces that are committed to helping in northern Honshu. And I think that at the conclusion of this, as we finish the work of disaster response and humanitarian relief and turn it back over to agencies and the government of Japan to administer to their people, you'll see the U.S.-Japan alliance stronger as a consequence of the support that we've provided and the work that we've done together, and you'll see a Japanese defense force that will emerge from this stronger for having experienced it.
So, Admiral, you don't believe that the change in the political party structure is going to interfere with this, our future relationship with Japan?
I think that that there were fits and starts as the DPJ administration assumed control of the Japanese government. And we saw that with one prime minister that ultimately departed in the midst of the Futenma replacement facility debate that was ongoing. Prime Minister Khan has enumerated many times his commitment to the U.S.-Japan alliance. I think he remains a strong proponent. I think after what has been witnessed following this regretful disaster in Japan, he'll remain a strong advocate of the alliance and our way forward. So right now I'm encouraged by the government's position with regard to alliance matters and the United States military and support to it in general.
Mahalo, Admiral. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mahalo.
Thank you. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Sharp, I have a cousin under your command over there right now, and my wife's cousin has been over there. And just a question on the Korea issue. The people in South Korea and North Korea, is there a general desire that that be a unified country, or do you believe that and that leadership is in the way of the unification, or do you believe that even with different leadership we would still see a South Korea and a North Korea?
Sir, from the people of the Republic of Korea, from South Korea, from the President on down, there is a strong desire for peaceful unification over time. There's no doubt in my mind about that. From a North Korean perspective, I think Kim Jong-il focuses on regime survival under any terms and counts on his continued development of nuclear capability and these provocative acts in order to be able to have his regime survive.
So when the mortality tables catch him, is that going to be an opportunity there for the peace and unification of Korea? Is that?
Sir, as you know, Kim Jong-un is his youngest son. We see indications that he may be becoming groomed to be the successor. What he does as he becomes the leadership in North Korea is yet to be seen. Obviously, we call upon him and whoever succeeds, the succession process within Kim Jong-il, within the regime, to take advantage of that opportunity to be able to care more about their people, to care more about human rights and dignity. But we don't see the indications of that happening, to be quite blunt. And that's why we, as a Republic of Korea, U.S. alliance, are working very hard to make sure that we're prepared for a North Korea of the future that could potentially continue the types of acts that we've seen over the last couple of years, that continue to work to develop nuclear weapons. And again, there is another path that North Korea could take, but we have not seen indications that they're willing or ready or able to do that.
Are other countries, in your opinion, working to nudge them down that path, to encourage that path, or do you think that they're standing in the way of that path?
Sure. I think that if you look at really the entire world after the actions that North Korea took, not only last year in the condemnation that they got from the United Nations, but also in previous years after the Taepodong launch, which was in direct violation of United Nations Security Councils and the nuclear test, the world has called on North Korea to change their ways. But as I said before, we don't see any action from North Korea headed in that direction at this time.
Thank you, sir. Admiral Willard, the nation's 17 Joint Star aircrafts are based out of my district, Robbins Air Force Base. With everything going on in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, I mean, if something did start, if we got into an action with North Korea, would we have the ISR capabilities that we need, or is that an area that we are stretched thin in with all of the actions that are occurring around the world right now?
Well, I would answer it two ways. First of all, the ISR capabilities on the Korean Peninsula are probably as robust as they are anywhere in our military, and consistently are maintained as such because we're in armistice and because we're constantly deterring the North. So General Sharp enjoys a capability and frankly a priority and commitment from the United States in order to meet his surveillance needs. That has only been improved upon and has gained more focus since the events last year, and particularly since the crisis on the Korean Peninsula December 20th of last year. When you consider the way in which we invest in our intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities writ large, during peacetime we kind of spread those capabilities around to the various combatant commands to meet all of our requirements, whether they're space-based or air breathers or ground-based sensor systems. Whenever we go to war or whenever a contingency erupts somewhere in the world, we tend to bias those capabilities toward that contingency. So for 10 years, we've given over many of those capabilities to the Middle East wars that have been fought. When something like Libya erupts, ISR goes in that direction. Frankly, when Japan and natural disasters occurred, ISR came in our direction in order to meet the demand signal of trying to characterize the Fukushima plants and the area that was affected by the natural disaster. So we share in those assets, and they tend to move around wherever they're in demand.
If I may just add to that from a coalition perspective, we work very hard in Korea to take advantage of the capabilities not only of U.S. ISR, but the Republic of Korea ISR. So we have a combined intel center with analysts from both the Republic of Korea and the United States that have been working this problem on the Korean side for years and years. And it's not just about airborne, it's SIGINT, it's all of the different components of intel to make sure that we're getting a full picture of what's going inside North Korea. So it's the U.S. assets that come combined with the Republic of Korea, and the tactics, techniques, and procedures that we've learned over the years give us that robust capability that we really need. And coalitions like what we have with the Republic of Korea are key to be able to do that in our part of the world and really around the world.
Thank both of you.
Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank the witnesses for their service and their testimony. It's almost exactly a year ago to the day when the Chonan was attacked by North Korean mini-subs. The forensic evidence is indisputable in terms of the analysis that was done, and frankly, the denial of that evidence by the Chinese government, even to some degree the Russian evaluation of this. I mean, frankly, when I listened to your answer, General, about the sort of international isolation of Korea in terms of its actions the last few years or so. I mean, frankly, in terms of at least the Chonan, that really hasn't been the case. And in terms of the mill-to-mill relationships, which you've been talking about with China, Admiral Willard, I mean, frankly, that's pretty discouraging because, I mean, that action just falls so outside any acceptable norm in terms of international law and certainly protection of sea lanes. I mean, can you update us at least in terms of whether or not you think there's any hope that we're going to get that international consensus about how, again, they violated really every level of law and decency in terms of what that attack represented?
Are you referring to China and
Yes,
Russia
China.
not acknowledging the
Correct.
international investigation report and so
Yes.
forth? Unquestionably, there has been alignment on the part of both China and, to, as you suggest, to a somewhat lesser extent Russia, to moderate any condemnation of North Korea's actions last year. And that was disappointing, but it's important to realize that the PRC remains an ally of North Korea. They maintain a mutual defense treaty together. And the longstanding philosophy of the PRC has been one of non-interference and a very strong desire for status quo or a maintenance of just a stable condition on the Korean Peninsula, regardless of the provocation that may have caused a disruption. And we saw evidence of that replay itself last year. It's nothing new. It is an area in which the U.S. view and Chinese view are highly divergent, and it's an area that I think between our two governments continues to need work, to your point.
And I think that's a good answer. I just would say that in this case, I mean, what we're really talking about just isn't about sort of non-intervention, but it's really about denial of the truth about what happened there. And I mean, that's what, again, in my opinion, just raises serious questions about, you know, how healthy the relationship is with the Chinese government and military. I've only got about a minute and a half. I guess a follow-on question to that incident. You know, by all sort of press and public accounts, I mean, there clearly was a problem there for the Chinese Navy, excuse me, the South Korean Navy in terms of being able to detect these mini-subs in very shallow waters. You know, we've talked a lot about sea-based deterrence. I mean, if there's, it sort of raises a question about whether or not sonar capability is a problem in terms of making sure that we are going to have, you know, robust sea-based deterrence if there's all these mini-subs that are being able to sort of hide in the noise of shallow waters. And I wonder if you could sort of comment on whether or not you feel confident that we're okay, and frankly, do we need to do more to help the South Korean Navy to deal with that issue?
Well, to your last point, we are doing more to help the South Korean Navy with their ASW readiness and preparedness. The U.S. 7th Fleet has a long-term goal and a series of milestones to accomplish that. So we continue to train with the ROC Navy in earnest to ensure that our readiness is maintained at a very high level. But I think to your first point, it's important to recognize that what occurred with Chonan was an unprovoked surprise attack, unexpected, typical of the provocations that we've experienced by Kim Jong-il in the past. So this was a sneak attack, as you suggest, by a mini-sub with a torpedo in a shallow water area when the relationship between the two militaries and the relationship on the water that particular night, you know, would not have caused their sonarmen or anyone else in the military to have expected an egregious attack such as occurred. So very difficult to ever predict or imagine preventing an unprovoked surprise attack, one-off, such as occurred with Chonan. But I think, to your point, that there is certainly a view inward that has been taken by the ROK Navy, and we will continue to support, and General Sharp will oversee, and that is the improvement of readiness and elimination of vulnerabilities across the board to the extent that we can across both sides, U.S. and Republic of Korea.
And the Republic of Korea has not just stood idly by. They have aggressively gone after changes to their techniques, and procedures out in the Northwest Island area in order to be able to counter that type of threat from the future. If you look in their defense reform, what they plan on buying and positioning out to take the sub-threat and to be able to reduce their vulnerabilities, they are putting it against that also. And as Admiral Willard said, we've worked very aggressively in some anti-sub warfare exercises in order to be able to have the strongest both deterrent but then preparation if North Korea decides to continue that in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and General Sharp, Admiral Willard, thank you for your service to our country. General Sharp, first of all, I appreciate your time yesterday and the information you shared with me on the great job the men and women of U.S. Forces Korea do on a daily basis. General, I understand that the Republic of Korea will assume wartime operational control in 2015. Are you confident their forces are ready to assume this role, and if not, what action must be taken to ensure they become ready?
Thank you, sir, and I did very much enjoy visiting with you yesterday afternoon. I am absolutely confident that by 1 December 2015, the Republic of Korea will be ready to take operational control and leadership of a future warfight. And we are working very hard with the Republic of Korea as part of, as I said in my opening statement, the Strategic Alliance 2015 agreement that was signed by the Secretary and the Minister last October to ensure that readiness. Let me highlight just a couple important points that are in that agreement. That also includes the milestones in order to be able to make sure that this event will occur and that actually the alliance will be stronger because of it. First off, we are working with the Republic of Korea to develop what are the capabilities they need in order to be able to lead the warfight after 2015. And ensuring that once that is agreed, that is in their budget, they are bought, organized, trained, and equipped with those capabilities. Secondly, we are revising our war plans to account for the fact that the Republic of Korea ROK JCS will be in the lead of the warfight across the full range of the different war plans that we have, and those will be complete by December 2015. We will then take and exercise all of those war plans in our 2 annual theater-level exercises that we will have multiple times between now and 2015. And then the last thing I'll say is that the professionalism and the capability of the Republic of Korea military is outstanding. I have seen over the last 3 years the capabilities, the decision-making ability, the willingness and the ability to be able to make sure that we are one team as an alliance between Combined Forces Command and the ROK Chairman staff, which will be in the lead of the warfight, increase enormously as a result of all these provocations that we talked about. So, yes, sir, I am confident that the Republic of Korea will be ready to lead the defense of their own country while maintaining the full commitment that the United States has as part of the alliance, not reducing our force and commitment, but they will be ready for the leadership role in 2015.
General Sharp, I know in our discussion yesterday that you felt that any reduction in the 28,500 U.S. military personnel on the peninsula would be the wrong message. But let me ask this question: that I understand that the intention of the Department of Defense was to draw down manpower at U.S. Forces Korea to 20,000, but that in 2008 the decision was changed to maintain manpower at 28,500. What would be the impact on operational readiness and the overall effectiveness of your command if this level was brought down to 20,000?
So as you correctly stated, when Secretary Gates came and looked at the path that we were on to move to 20,000, at that time my predecessor, General Bell, came to say we need to stop it where we are right now, which at the time was 28,500. And I agree with that assessment, and Secretary Gates and President Obama, for that matter, has stated that that will be the level that we continue at in the future. To reduce from that level would critically reduce our capabilities in the very beginning part of the warfight to receive forces that come in to reinforce, to help with the NEO in order to be able to get our family members and U.S. citizens out there. To reduce on the Air Force side would reduce our capability to rapidly strike into North Korea at the long-range artillery. 28.5 is the right amount for the war plans that we have in place now and will have for the next several years.
Do you think that after 2015, when the South Koreans take operational control, that the numbers should be reexamined?
Sir, I think 28.5, looking at the war plans and how we are currently working through what they will look like after OPCON transition in 2015, the current number, 28.5, I believe, is the right number to maintain for that warfight in the future. Again, the main thing that changes after OPCON transition is the leadership of the warfight, how we physically maneuver forces on the ground, who has the responsibility for different aspects of the warfight, for the most part stays the same. And so I do think 28.5, again, we always evaluate this when we go through different analysis of our warfights and what the capabilities of the Republic of Korea is, what the threat from North Korea is. But from what I see right now, 28.5 is the right number for after OPCON transition also.
Mr. Garamendi is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Admiral, to you, your men and women in your command, the work that you're doing in Japan dealing with the disaster there is extremely important and I think really represents the very best of America. And we thank you for that and thank all of them that are involved, some of it in a very dangerous situation. In response to a question maybe 15, 20 minutes ago, and this may be the end of the queries, you mentioned communications with China and the military-to-military communications. Could you expand on that, the current status, your goals, how you see that developing? I agree with what you said very briefly before. It's extremely important, and if you could cover that, please.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, the commitment that we have and what we believe is the right future between the United States Armed Forces and the Chinese military is that we achieve, maintain, and sustain a continuous military-to-military dialogue at the highest levels and some level of exchange and contributing to trust building at other levels within our respective militaries. We've done or been very challenged in seeing that achieved. As you know, our mill-to-mill relationship with the Chinese has been characterized by fits and starts, often due to disagreements between our two nations. We went through nearly a year of hiatus last year as a consequence of the last round of Taiwan arms sales, though we've been episodically selling defense articles and services to Taiwan for the last 30 years. So China gets a vote in this, but we have attempted to convince them and discuss with them the importance of these two very consequential militaries in the Western Pacific having the ability to discuss both areas in which we converge and areas of difference. And I think that is the most important thing. And we are currently back in a mill-to-mill sequence, but one that is relatively modest. And I would offer, you know, the promises that ultimately the mill-to-mill relationship will be one that we have envisioned, you know, probably not entirely achievable, but rather some modicum of that right now would satisfy me that we're headed in the right direction.
Okay. At any time, have we cut off the discussions?
With the Chinese?
Yes.
Not in my experience, no.
Thank you. One further question. The flow of oil seems to be a lot about all that we're talking here. Could you briefly discuss the Chinese view of the flow of oil from the Middle East to China and the role of the American Navy in that?
Well, the United States Navy for more than a century has been providing security on the high seas in the Asia-Pacific region, both in the Western Pacific and Indian Ocean regions. Given the importance of Middle East oil to our allies and friends in the region, ourselves, and to include the Chinese, the United States has been providing safety on those sea lines of communication, ranging back to tanker wars, if you'll recall, in the 1980s, where we were protecting the tanker ships exiting the Persian Gulf. The Chinese have been insatiable consumers of many resources, oil included, and they regard the flow of oil as a national security concern, I think, from the Middle East. They have built both port structures, and they're establishing pipelines into western China from locations on the Indian Ocean side in order to relieve the amount of strain on the sea lines of communication themselves. Nonetheless, choke points like the Strait of Malacca remain crucial, and I think we all regard its security and safety as critically important. The nations that guard the security of the straits, very important to both us as well as to the Chinese.
Finally, in 10 seconds, Mr. Chairman, I want to commend the Navy for its enthusiasm to look for other sources of fuel besides carbon oil, in other words, advanced biofuels.
We hope to have a carrier strike group operating on advanced biofuels very shortly.
You're to be commended. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and ask my questions now, gentlemen. Thank you for both being here. Appreciate your service so very much. This is sort of a follow-on related to a couple of earlier questions, Mr. Bartlett's question, Mr. Bordalio's question. Mr. Bartlett pointed out the incontrovertible reality that when a nation becomes a nuclear-armed nation, that our diplomacy is radically altered. And to that point, it occurs to me that we need to be very aware of how much North Korea is cooperating with other nations or potentially passing on nuclear technology to other rogue nations like Iran. We know there's been a lot of discussion between the two countries and work between the two countries related to their missile technology, and it appears that Iran is now beyond even North Korea's capability in missile technology. So tell me, if you can, what our ability and our actions are related to preventing North Korea from sharing nuclear technology with other rogue nations. And I'll let you both take a look at it.
Sir, as you know, there's several UN Security Council resolutions which require other nations on the proliferation side, to work very hard to make sure North Korea is not proliferating any nuclear or missile technology. We have seen in the past, we know the assistance that North Korea gave to Syria several years ago for the nuclear plant that they were building there. We have seen on some of the missile proliferation things where countries have stopped some shipments recently because of proliferation. The specific nuclear exchanges and information flow between North Korea and Iran, I think, would have to take into a classified session to go into depth on that, sir.
But we're working on it, is what you're saying. Yeah. Well, let me just shift gears then, because I don't want to take us in the wrong direction. There were recent reports that North Korea is nearing the completion of an EMP type of weapon. I understand that they're using a lot of old Soviet-style jamming capabilities to jam the South Korean GPS, and that South Korea believes that that's a wake-up call, that this may be a tactic that North Korea will use more and more in terms of their jamming capabilities. And if they're already working on an EMP weapon, do you have any indication that they might be working on some sort of intentional mechanical, electromagnetic interference, some type of device-based EMP jamming capability? And what about this EMP weapon that they talk about, an EMP bomb, as it were? I'm told that it's made to detonate at 25 miles up, which is a conflict in my mind, since most effective EMP weapons would be higher. And in the 25 miles would be within the atmosphere, and it occurs to me that that would be a suppression of the EMP emission itself. Do you know where they are on their EMP capability in terms of weaponizing it, either device-based or any sort of nuclear explosive or nuclear warhead-based EMP?
So unfortunately, on the EMP side, we're going to need to take that into a classified session. I can say on the GPS jamming side, we have seen North Korea's use of GPS jammers up on the northwest part of the Republic of Korea, and the Republic of Korea government has called on North Korea to stop that jamming.
Do you think it portends a more widening of a particular tactic? Do you think they intend to develop their jamming capability, either EMP or radio frequency or otherwise?
So I think North Korea is continuing to develop a lot of different capabilities in the asymmetric threat capability way. It's one of the way, it is where they've been putting their money, between ballistic missile capability, nuclear, and special operating forces, to asymmetrically try to force change in South Korea, to send messages to other audiences, the United States in particular, that they are a nation that cannot be challenged. I think they look for many different ways to do that.
Well, last question, gentlemen. I always try to ask the question, what is the most important or most significant challenge that we face that needs to be addressed from North Korea? And if you can do it at the 50,000-foot level where it doesn't enter any sort of classified concern, and maybe let you both take a shot at it. Admiral Willard, if it's all right, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I think the most significant is nuclearization and the development of ballistic missile delivery systems that have now reached the point of being intercontinental. So we are obviously concerned by that development. A denuclearized North Korea is both the commitment that the international community has made and an imperative, I think, given the nature of this regime.
I agree with Admiral Willard. I'll say it in a slightly different way. The status quo is no longer acceptable. The status quo, I think, that the world sometimes sees in North Korea and says, let's just return to the status quo, is a status quo that killed many Republic of Korea citizens and service members last year. It's a status quo that has launched ballistic missiles in contravention with UN Security Council resolutions. It's a status quo that's continuing to develop nuclear weapons. And I think at the 50,000-foot level for the world and all of the leadership of the world to understand status quo is no longer acceptable, because where it is heading is not acceptable to the world, and to force changes in North Korea is the #1 challenge that we in the world have for the future.
Well, General, I don't know if it impresses you, but I agree with you. Thank you, sir. Thank you both. And now we'll go to Mr. Runyon is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Willard, General Sharp, thank you for your service to this country, and thanks for being here today. Admiral, I just wanted to thank you for your response to Mr. Turner's question earlier about the Aegis missile defense system that is actually manufactured in my backyard, and I'm sure those men and women that work to create that system and maintain it would appreciate those kind words. But as far as you were talking earlier, and we were talking about terrorism threats around the world, and you were talking how you were complimenting the Philippines for their active duty in it and their preparedness for it. And as far as your command engaging with other international partners in Southeast Asia, do you think you have the appropriate level of funding and/or the authorities to make sure that kind of is upheld in that region?
Are you referring to counterterrorism in
Yes.
particular? Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. In South Asia, to use a different location as an example, we're endeavoring to work with Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and the nation of India to contain Lashkar-e-Taiba, a Pakistani-based extremist organization that is already established in South Asia and was responsible for the attack into Mumbai. In order to accomplish that, we've been working very closely with the Office of the Secretary of Defense in ensuring that we have adequate resources, including authorities, to be able to accomplish that mission. To date, in the way that the support to the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Operation Enduring Freedom Philippines, was developed, we have had the authorities commensurate with the mission that we were on. As we attempt to build capacities in other nations, it's important that we continue to identify shortfalls both in authorities and shortfalls in resources to be able to build the capacities in these partner nations such that they can become increasingly self-sufficient in dealing with the extremist organizations that are present there. So that's currently our focus in Bangladesh and Nepal, and to a lesser extent Sri Lanka and the Maldives right now. We are operating within authorities that are adequate, I would offer, and we're constantly seeking increased authorities to give us more latitude in order to be less episodic and more continuous in our efforts to build the capacities with, through, and by these partner nations.
And to what extent have relations improved between China and Taiwan and its impact on the Strait?
I think the evolution throughout the Ma administration with regard to Taiwan, mainland China relations has been one of constant improvement. I mean, we've been encouraged by the relationships that have existed. I would offer that there is an election on Taiwan scheduled for 2012, and that is worth watching over, given the fact that this administration will soon be coming to an end, and a re-election process will then be unfolding.
Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman, and yield to Mr. Conway for 5 minutes.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm obviously only thing stands between you and getting out of here. Admiral Willard, this doesn't fall under your responsibility, but the NDAA requires an annual assessment of Chinese military capabilities, strategies, and intentions. Due March the 1st each year, still not here as of 6th of April. Have your command, I suspect, would have a chance to look at it and have some influence on it. Have you had a chance to look at that this year's version?
You're referring to the NDAA?
Well, the NDAA's requirement that the OSD provide us, the committees, with a report on China's military capacities, strategies, locations, those kinds of things. It's due March 1st each year.
Yes, sir. I would offer that we have been in continuous dialogue with the Office of the Secretary of Defense on all issues pertaining to China and China's military.
Well, I understand, but particularly with the report itself, apparently it hasn't risen to your level in terms of a...
It has not risen to my personal level.
Is it something that you and your team used last year's report? I mean, do you use that data or that information in the report for anything?
Certainly. We definitely consume it and add it to the portfolio of China knowledge that we will then carry on with for the remainder of the year.
Okay. Well, obviously the NDA and other pieces of legislation require a zillion different reports, and means somebody has to do it in this age of trying to cut costs. We're looking for those that have a meaningful impact on the way you run your business, but that also give us an insight into how you run your business and how it's done, and how that so we can do the oversight.
Understood.
And so if you wouldn't mind, next time you bump into Secretary Mavis, just say, hey, by the way, the committee's asking about that report one more time, because we think it's reported. If you look through the list of things that we asked to be assessed, it would appear to be the exact same things that you would need to think about day in and day out as to how you run PACOM. General Sharp, good to see you again. Over there one time with former Chairman Skelton, it was a great trip. As the accompanied tours or the command-sponsored tours increase in Korea, are you concerned at all about incidences on the economy where people do stupid stuff from time to time, not necessarily things that happen in Okinawa that help drive some of the changes there, but have you had enough experience now to know that our kids and their kids can get along, and that this doesn't become sort of a problem with the Koreans?
Sir, I am very satisfied. We watch, of course, our incident rates very, very closely as we have more service members and family members over there. Korea is an extremely safe place to live, and it is a great place for our service members and their families to be there because of the love the Korean people have and the respect that they have for U.S. forces there. There was a recent poll that just came out from the State Department that said when asked to the people of the Republic of Korea, what is the importance of U.S. forces on the peninsula, over 87% said important or very important. So and the incidents, there's always one or two. We do the appropriate action to be able to take care of that, but I am very proud of our service members and their families. They understand they are ambassadors of the United States to the Republic of Korea, and they are living up to that responsibility.
That's good to hear, because we do want to be good guests, even though we're there to help them and to protect them from a lot of bad stuff. So, gentlemen, thank you for your service. Thank you for being here this morning, and I'll yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conaway. And as it happens, he's left an extra minute for Mr. Larson here has a final question. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Conaway. Admiral Willard, last year I was out at PACOM and visited with the Pacific Fleet and Army, and I think we met with Marines and Air Force to talk about building partner capacity projects. And I think the assessment was things are going very well. But the question I had for you is how you think the dollar flow works. Does it work well enough? Do we have the right? Do they have the right authorities to use relative to the things that we've done here, developing 1206 and 1208, in addition to the other grab bag of tools that exist in the federal budget for you all to do this effort? Can you give me an assessment about that, not about how well the projects are going, but on how the budgets work, and if you have the authorities, or should there be fewer barriers between these accounts? Would the flexibility help, but or not help? Can you talk about that a little bit?
For the past several years, we've been, I think, all pushing to streamline these instruments that allow us to work with our partners throughout the world. And I say we, collectively, all the combatant commanders, I think, have been very interested in having ready access to the tools that we have come to rely on that enable that work to occur, whether that's 1206 funding, IMET, foreign military financing, foreign military sales. I mean, these are items that are crucial with regard to the relations that we have with the many partners throughout the Asia-Pacific, 36 nations, 34 of which have militaries or security forces that we're working alongside. So the less the impediments and difficulties with regard to administering to these instruments, the better.
Yeah. And any particular, as a principle, that's great. Any particular problems that you or your folks have faced?
I guess I would offer that coming from the customer base, right. At times the inability of FMS to be as responsive as it needs to be is probably the biggest criticism that we receive. There are many, many requests to be educated in and work more closely, be trained inside the United States. And so for those reasons, our IMET funding is crucial. But at the end of the day, I think delays and complexity of process with regard to the exchange of materials with our partners is the one most serious complaint that we hear.
All right, great, great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming to this committee. We have no way to express to you our gratitude. We do our best, but we know that you're the ones that carry the load of freedom on your back, and the nation owes you beyond any ability of mine to articulate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
We're adjourned.